A single meeting can change headlines. Sometimes it can change history. When the American president met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the world paused. Not because a war ended, but because a new narrative began. Words like peace, progress, and talks immediately filled the media. For some, this was a moment of hope. While for others, it raised serious questions. Because in global politics, peace is rarely just peace. It is strategy, it is timing, and most importantly, it is power. This video doesn't take sides. Instead, it asks a difficult but necessary question. Was this meeting a real step toward ending the war, or was it a political move shaped by global interests? To understand the importance of this meeting, we have to recognize one basic fact. The Ukraine war is not just a regional war. Since Russia's invasion in 2022, this conflict has become a global geopolitical crisis. It involves NATO and its eastern expansion, Russia's security concerns, the United States' role as a global power, and Europe's dependence on security alliances. Ukraine sits right at the center of these immense forces. For Ukraine, this is a fight for its very survival, its sovereignty, and territorial integrity. For Russia, it's framed as a strategic defense and resistance to Western influence. And for the United States and its allies, it's about defending international law and maintaining global stability. This layered reality means every single discussion about peace carries global consequences. So, who is the American president in this specific context? He approaches foreign policy differently from many traditional leaders. His style often emphasizes direct, leader-to-leader diplomacy. He is known for questioning long-term military involvement, favoring negotiation and deal-making, and often calculating the costs and benefits of prolonged engagement. During discussions about Ukraine, his public statements have consistently emphasized ending the war quickly, reducing the financial burden on the United States, and encouraging direct negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. So when he engages in talks related to Ukraine, the framing is predictable. The war should end through talks. This position definitely resonates with some audiences, but it also concerns others, because speed in diplomacy doesn't always equal stability. Now let's look at President Zelensky's position. He is a leader with very limited options. He isn't negotiating from a position of comfort or strength. Since the invasion, Ukraine has lost thousands of lives, suffered widespread destruction of its infrastructure, and experienced a severe economic crisis. The country depends heavily on international military and financial support just to keep going. Zelensky's core demands have been consistent and publicly stated: full respect for Ukraine's sovereignty, the complete withdrawal of Russian forces, and strong security guarantees for the future. Historical examples strongly support his caution. Weak agreements often lead to renewed conflict. Temporary ceasefires don't prevent future invasions. And promises without real enforcement mechanisms almost always fail under pressure. Zelensky's challenge is simple but severe. How do you agree to peace without risking the entire future of your country? So, what was actually discussed in this high-profile meeting? Let's stick to the verified facts. Publicly confirmed information tells us that the discussions focused on possibilities for peace. There was an emphasis on ending active hostilities and a consideration of different security frameworks. However, both sides acknowledged that major obstacles still remain. What's just as important is what was not confirmed. No official document or statement confirms any territorial concessions, any binding security guarantees, or any finalized peace terms. This is a critical point. Much of the controversy and speculation surrounding this meeting comes not from what was said, but from what was left unsaid and unconfirmed. This brings us to why peace talks are so politically complicated. It's a factual observation from history that peace talks fail more often than they succeed. There are several reasons for this. First, conflicting interests. Each party defines peace in a way that benefits them. For Ukraine, peace means security and sovereignty. For Russia, peace might mean strategic control. For Western powers, peace means stability. When these fundamental definitions clash, agreements are almost impossible to reach. Second, timing and power dynamics. Peace talks usually happen when one side feels immense pressure. When resources are running out, or when domestic political cycles demand results, peace is very rarely discussed from a position of strength. And third, the enforcement problem. Agreements without strong enforcement mechanisms have to rely on trust. And in international politics, trust is a very limited resource. With all that complexity, it's reasonable and factual to ask, who really benefits from a peace narrative? Who gains from presenting peace as being just around the corner? Well, political leaders often gain a boost in public approval. Financial markets gain a sense of stability, which they love, and allies gain some diplomatic breathing room. However, these benefits are not distributed equally. For the countries directly involved in the war, like Ukraine, a rushed peace can be dangerous. It can freeze unresolved conflicts, delay justice for victims, and normalize territorial disputes. Peace narratives often comfort global audiences, but they can place a heavy burden on frontline nations who have to live with the consequences of a fragile deal. Here's another uncomfortable but verified fact. Military operations almost always continue, even while diplomatic discussions are happening. This pattern is very common in modern conflicts. Why? Because talks take a long time. Applying military pressure can strengthen a country's negotiating position, and no side wants to appear weak by pausing its military actions. Therefore, talks do not equal a ceasefire. This reality explains why there is so much skepticism whenever peace is announced too early or too optimistically. The fighting on the ground tells its own story. The American president places a strong emphasis on personal relationships in his diplomacy. But is personal diplomacy actually enough to secure a lasting peace? History shows us some very mixed results. Sometimes it can be incredibly effective at breaking through deadlocks, but other times it can be unstable and unreliable. Peace built on personal relationships depends entirely on the individuals involved, on their personal authority, their political continuity, and their mutual incentives. But governments change. Elections happen. Policies shift. A peace built on the relationship between two individuals, rather than on strong, independent institutions, often lacks durability and can fall apart as soon as one of those leaders leaves office. Beyond just Ukraine and the United States, this meeting sends powerful signals to the rest of the world. To Europe, it sends a signal about the future of security commitments and the role of the U.S. in defending the continent. To smaller states around the globe, sends a signal about whether international law will be upheld or if powerful nations can redraw borders through force. And to other global powers, it sends a signal about the leverage of negotiation versus the rule of law. If major wars begin to end primarily through backroom deals rather than through established legal frameworks, the entire global order could change. This isn't alarmism. It's a legitimate observation in the study of international relations. So, after all this, is peace actually possible? The answer is yes. Peace is always possible. But sustainable peace, the kind that lasts for generations, requires very specific ingredients. It requires clear and unambiguous terms. It requires strong enforcement mechanisms that hold all parties accountable. And it requires long-term security planning. History confirms this truth over and over again. Peace without structure is just a temporary pause in the conflict. It's fragile and destined to break. So, let's bring it all together for a final analysis. Was this meeting about peace, or was it a political moment? The meeting clearly represents a diplomatic moment. It is a political signal and a major media event. But it does not yet represent a finalized agreement, a ceasefire, or a guaranteed resolution to the war. Calling it peace at this stage would be premature. But calling it meaningless would also be inaccurate. The truth, as it so often does, lies somewhere in between. It's a step, but the length and direction of the journey are still unknown. This leads us to the real question we should be asking. The question is not, do these leaders want peace? Of course they do, in their own way. The real, more important question is, what kind of peace are they talking about, for whom? Because history teaches us a very important lesson. Wars do not end when the talks begin. They end when the agreements signed can actually protect the future, not just create a convenient solution for the present. This video is for educational and analytical purposes only. It's based on verified public information, historical patterns, and official statements. It does not promote any political ideology. Thanks for watching, and if you found this analysis helpful, please consider liking and subscribing for more deep dives into global events.